As the sun rose in the desert sky, Tuwa kneaded soft orange clay on a rock and then began pounding it on one side, then another, forming it into a rectangular brick. Nearby, bricks were laid out in neat rows, ready to be baked hard by the rising sun. Tuwa's older sister, Yoki, had recently married, and her family was working together to build a home for the couple. Her father and brother had been away for many days, cutting down trees from a faraway forest to help support the roof. Having run out of clay to shape, Tuwa stood, stretched, and began loading finished dry bricks into a basket near the wall of her house. Just then, her mother appeared on the roof above and called down, "Do you have more bricks for me yet?" "Yes," answered Tuwa, as she placed the last bricks in the basket. Her mother and sister Yoki pulled on the rope, raising the basket to where they stood. Yoki's new home would be an extension of the family home, a few new rooms built on top of the rooms her family used for storing food and grinding grains. Tuwa climbed the ladder to the roof of one of the ground-level rooms. This was the only way into the house, a ladder that could quickly be pulled up in case of attack from strangers who lived outside the pueblo, or village, where they lived. The walls of the new rooms were coming along nicely. Mother laid the bricks while Yoki spread a thin layer of mud between them to help stick them together. In one corner of the rooftop sat her little sister, Talasi, and her grandmother, Una, grinding dried corn with their mortar and pestle, a bowl and stick both made of stone, in order to make corn flour. Grandmother Una was telling Talasi of times long ago, when the desert was once a land of grass, where food could be found almost anywhere, and the animals were abundant for hunting. Back then, Tuwa's ancestors had followed the herds, but now the land was different. Wild food and animals were harder to find, so the people of the pueblo tended their own gardens of corn, squash, and beans, and filled entire rooms of these foods, which could be stored for a long time, providing them with nourishment through the cold winter months. Now, though, it was summer. The hot sun was relentless, and Tuwa was glad of the shade provided by the cliff walls overhead. Tuwa's people, the ancestors to the people known today as the Hopi, had built their pueblo into the side of the cliff. Not only did the cliff provide protection from the summer sun, it was also hard to get to, and the people could see intruders coming from far away. The cliffs also helped her people get water, for the rocks were made of sandstone, a type of stone that is wholly like a sponge, allowing water to pass through and collect in springs within the village. From her vantage point on top of the roof, Tuwa saw a line of figures slowly making their way up the treacherous path to the village. They carried long poles balanced between them on their shoulders, so Tuwa knew it must be the men returning with the beams for the ceiling. Although the path was dangerous, Tuwa did not worry. The men of the pueblo knew it well, and it was really only a problem for intruders. "They are returning," Tuwa called excitedly. Her mother and sister stopped their work to turn and look down the path. "Good timing," Mother said. "We will be ready to lay the beams tomorrow." She and Yoki exchanged tired but pleased smiles. That evening, Tuwa's family gathered with several other families in the kiva, an underground room shared by the whole pueblo as a place to gather for rituals or just to come together to tell stories. Hundreds of years ago, the people of the pueblo lived in the underground kivas, which were entered through a hole in the ceiling and a ladder leading down. But now they lived above ground and only used the ancient kivas on special occasions. That night, the men had many stories to share about the thick forest where they found the timbers for the beams, the animals, both large and small, that lived there, and about the pueblos they saw along the way. One pueblo in Chaco Canyon was huge. Tuva's uncle described it. "The whole pueblo was planned out before they started building," he told them. "All of the buildings together make up one great house, the shape of the moon when she is half full. There are hundreds of rooms and many kivas for the people to gather." Was it not dangerous to approach such a pueblo? Asked Tua's mother. Not at all, replied her uncle. We were invited when we saw some of the men upon the road. Travelers are welcome. They bring goods from far and wide to trade. He went on to describe exotic birds they kept, shells from ocean creatures, and necklaces and headdresses made of pounded metals from the great empires to the south. Long into the night they told stories of these people, who were similar to themselves, yet so different. The next day, the walls of Yoki's new home were complete, and it was time to lay the beams for the roof. As the men lifted and carefully laid the beams across the top of the dwelling, the women continued to work on the walls, smoothing watered-down clay over the clay bricks to make the walls smooth and strong. Once the large beams had been laid, the men laid smaller beams in the opposite direction. After that came a layer of sticks, and finally a layer of straw. Then the women laid more bricks, a few courses higher than the beams, and covered the whole thing with more of the watered-down clay, or adobe, making the whole building look like it was molded from a lump of clay. In some places where rain might fall on the roof, downspouts were made to collect rainwater. The rooms that made up Yoki's home would be entered by a hole in the ceiling. The men built ladders that would stand in the holes and found large slabs of stone that could cover the openings when it rained or in the cold months of winter. Finally, Yoki and Mother painted the inside walls of the rooms with a white paint made of crushed rock to keep the walls from cracking or leaking in the rain. Soon, Yoki's home was finished. Tua helped her older sister build a fireplace of brick and adobe, and then they brought in Yoki's things: her loom for weaving, pottery for cooking, blankets, a grass broom, and a large water jug. Now Yoki's home was ready to live in. Many ancient Hopi pueblos still exist today, although they have broken down from being exposed to the elements for so long. Mesa Verde is a pueblo like the one described in the story. Tourists travel to Colorado to visit this ancient village. Many people in the southwest United States continue to build and live in adobe homes. They are warm in winter and cool in summer, so they are perfectly suited to the desert climate. Adobe homes are another example of people using what is available where they live to build their houses.